Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We're rolling along. Lots of great things happening.
I hope. I'm going to be honest. We're recording this early, and so you saying that is really setting me up for hoping our next couple weeks go smoothly. But fingers crossed that we're not lying and things went great. I'm really excited about this episode. Start to the summer. It's getting warmer out. A lot of people are, asking questions about hydration and fueling and all of those things, as they should. And we have Lauren Adams, who is a registered dietitian, but beyond that, she's also a type 1 diabetic. So, she's someone who has had to kind of master technology when it comes to things like glucose monitoring, sweat rate monitoring, fueling, hydration, because for her, she's an endurance athlete. She does marathons. If she messes that up, it is way more problematic than like a bunk that you or I might have. But that means she's like played with all of the toys, all of the stuff. And because she is a registered dietitian, she has a background in like actually really understanding it. So today we are talking all about, training with a chronic condition like type 1 diabetes, but also just kind of the role hydration plays in all of the things. We talked so much about fueling, right? Like we've had so many dietitians on talking about carbs, talking about, grams per hour. And hydration always kind of gets this like little bit of like drink like a bottle per hour sort of secondary thing. But it's actually like, I'm going to argue it's more important if you're not. I
guess water's more important to life, I guess.
Well, literally, if you're not hydrating, all of the gels in the world are not going to help you at all. I always remember Alan Lim trying to explain this to me when we were on a trip like 15 years ago, maybe. And he was, demonstrating, he's like, you have your gut, and he's like holding his hands, like making a circle. And he's like, and then you put all these like gels and like rice bar, like all of the stuff in it. And it's all good stuff. But if you don't have the water, it's all just sitting there in your gut and it can't go through because it's so thick. And so it's just like sitting like a big ball of stuff. So I've always thought about that, and I always feel like we do not do hydration justice. So I'm excited to have an entire episode where that's what we're talking about.
And definitely the the sweat rate tests have been more popular in the last little bit.
Yeah, so she's been working with Nick's biosensors, which is, it sort of looks just like a continuous glucose monitor. So I feel like she's just covered with different wearables at this point. But that one, is supposed to monitor not just how much liquid you're sweating out, but also what's in it. So how much sodium, so you kind of know what you should be putting back in. But you can also DIY this pretty easily, just getting on a scale before and after your ride, paying attention to how much you drink during that ride. So you can kind of add all of that together in a lovely sweat rate equation. It's a little bit more work, but it's totally doable.
Right.
And also paying attention, as you sweat, is it salty? Are you actually getting like the white lines? I realize with my black Norda shoes that I am a very salty sweater, as it turns out, because the shoes actually end up with white lines all over them.
Sure.
And it changes during like.
Well, I was going to say we're also coming into the summer now, so that's what you'll see is that's one of the adaptations with heat adaptation is that you retain more sodium.
Yeah, so I thought that was a super interesting thing because it kind of shows that even if you get your sweat rate tested in a lab setting, it's still not going to necessarily correlate with, how you're doing outside. So this is kind of a constant work in progress, constant rebalancing, figuring out what works for you. So I think talking to her really got me thinking about the delicate dance that is fueling and hydration. On one hand, it is very simple. Eat something, drink something. But there is just like so much feeling and nuance to it. And, again, I think she just has such a good take on, really paying attention to her body. Because again, if she doesn't, it could be very, very bad. But I think we could all probably like take a page from that book and pay way more attention. Like pretend As though a bonk could be very, very bad for you
Right.
when you're out. And I think it does kind of make that difference. All right. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Lauren Adams. Lauren Adams, welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today.
Thanks. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm honestly very impressed right now that you're this wide awake. It's much earlier for you than it is for me. But I'm glad we have this opportunity. I mean, I guess, just a couple weeks ago, you would have had a very early morning start with the Boston Marathon. So before I get into who you are, I actually did just want to ask, like, how was Boston? Because, that's sort of how we connected and is such a cool race to be a part of.
It was my third time doing it. It is just so special. And I think um, I wrote three things on my arm for the race. I wrote joy, gratitude, and fight, because
Ooh.
those were the three things I needed to focus on and think about as I was doing that race. Because it's a hard race, a special race. Any race, like you train so hard to get there. And I always tell myself, okay, the hay's in the barn, like you've done the work, like just get to the finish line, you've done everything you need to do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
um, so it was really cool, and also really cool because we have a team called Diabetes Sports Project that we have about 30 athletes on the team, and we had six athletes total running Boston, so all qualified runners. um, and so we all met up for a shakeout run on Sunday before the race and hung out together, had coffee, did a little shopping at some of the pop-up shops, and it's just really special to be able to share with people that understand how challenging what we're doing is. Managing type 1 diabetes on top of racing really hard is it's a special kind of challenge. So
Yeah. And okay, I have a follow-up on that. But before I get into that, I want to do a little bit of background and context on you for our listeners.
sure.
So you're a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, experienced marathoner, obviously, and you have type 1 diabetes. Yeah. How did you end up in the registered dietitian field? Because I feel like when you have a chronic condition like type 1 diabetes, there's sort of like the two avenues you can take. You can either
Yeah.
lean way into learning everything and figuring everything about it, or you can, really like put that over here, box that up and keep it, very outside of everything. And you've really embraced it.
Oh, I've leaned way in. So I was diagnosed when I was 11. It was 1992. I attended diabetes camps growing up. Actually, in college, I started out as an art major. So I was studying photography and also did a ton of painting, did a bunch of art programs throughout high school. That was my main focus. And then sometime in college, I was like, well, shoot, like, I don't know if I can get healthcare insurance as an artist. And because at the time you couldn't, like, if you had a chronic condition, you couldn't go get your own healthcare insurance, like if you didn't have it through
Yeah.
work, right? And then I was working through the Diabetes Society of Santa Clara Valley. I grew up in the Bay Area in Northern
Okay.
California. So I worked at the organization that was running the camps, and there were a bunch of diabetes educators, nurses, dietitians that worked at that site, seeing patients. So I was there working on the camp programs, and they were there seeing patients. And I was like, well, shoot, I could get healthcare insurance. I could work with people with diabetes. Like, this sounds awesome. I changed my major and then promptly walked into my first chemistry class and went, "Oh geez, what did I do? What
Oh
did I
no.
do? This is way different than art. I'm jumping into science." Um, Ironically, now, I still volunteer with diabetes camps. I direct a wilderness camp. So camps here in Idaho. I'm also going up to a camp in Alaska in June to volunteer there with kids. Super fun. So I always tell them, I was like, managing diabetes is like an art and it's like a science. Because I think sometimes, the general population, especially with type 1 diabetes, it's very involved. Yes, there's a lot of math involved. Yes, you need to know your carb ratio and your correction factor, and you need to know how much insulin to take. And formulas for that. But then the art part of it comes in that there's all these variables that get thrown at you. Like if you get sick or exercise is a huge variable. Yes, it's helpful. Yes, it brings down your blood sugar, but it's like this huge variable to manage. So jumped into it. I studied nutrition. I got my Bachelor of Science in dietetics. Then I went to Penn State University, did my internship there, met my husband, and then I was like, well, I'm not going back to California. And he's like, do you want to move to Florida? I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So we moved to Florida together. I got my first job as a dietitian. I passed my dietitian exam, got certified, and then worked in the hospital, then started working in an endocrinology office, and then became a certified diabetes educator. Worked in pediatrics, adult endocrinology, and then I worked for Dexcom that makes glucose sensors. I worked for them for about 5 years, supervised their clinical team. And then I jumped back when we moved to Boise. I jumped back into pediatric endocrinology. And then I worked for Tandem, the insulin pump company. I worked for them for about 6 years, doing clinical, but also doing sales for them. And now I work in pharmaceuticals doing like rare disease. So I just
All
keep my
over.
hat in the diabetes game with all the volunteering with the team and,
Yeah. I love it.
yeah.
Where did running come into this? Were you an active kid, or was this something you kind of developed along the way?
Yeah, I have two older brothers, and grew up running. I don't know. I just always liked running. So even before I was diagnosed, I was running. But then I ran in junior high. I ran track. I ran track in high school and cross country in high school. I made it to the state meet when I was in high school, which was really cool. Not that many people made it to the state meet. And then it was really different managing diabetes back then, right? Like the
Hmm.
insulins were different. We didn't have glucose sensors. I was just going out for a run, going, how do I feel? Like, do I feel low? Do I feel high? Like, where am I? Right. So just going based on body cues, I'd sometimes carry a meter, but honestly, I really didn't. I'm pretty sure I carried some kind of glucose with me to treat if I went low. I don't know how my parents handled all that. Like I just go out in the woods and go running, and, you know. Um, but it was scary, honestly. I was trying to manage my diabetes really closely, and when you're managing blood sugars really tightly, you have more of a risk of low blood sugars. But the benefit here is that you manage blood sugars tightly, you don't have as many high blood sugars, and long term, the complications come from high blood sugars. You also kind of feel terrible when your blood sugar's high and you don't perform well. So you want to be in target if you want to perform and race well.
Hmm.
Um, the downside of that is I had some really severe low blood sugars, like having seizures. One time I was babysitting. This was after cross country practice, and I was in the middle of putting the kids to bed. The kids went to bed. I had a seizure, and the parents came home and found me on the kitchen floor. I did not get to babysit for them again. But
Okay, but the fact that you mentioned babysitting makes me have to say it. The only reason I have a knowledge, or like a depth of
yeah,
knowledge about type 1 diabetes is obviously Stacy from the Babysitters
Stacy.
Club. Like
Yes.
that must have actually been really interesting for you because the Babysitters Club would have been like a pretty popular series as
Yeah,
you were growing up. And
for sure.
how was it like being able to see a character like you kind of like living life, doing all the stuff? Like, was that actually helpful?
It kind of, yes. Yeah. I think a lot of times diabetes isn't uh, shown in like the best light. Like you also have like steel magnolias, right? Like Shelby, like drink the juice, Shelby, and then poor Shelby dies. Um, those are really sad stories, and complications still do happen, but they're not the ones that, I don't feel like, especially as a diabetes educator, I don't feel like fear motivates very many people, right? And, it's good to know what the complications are, but not necessarily helpful. So Babysitters Club, yes, but actually, what inspired me the most was in college. So I also ran in college. I ran cross country at San Jose State. It was a D2 school. I didn't have a scholarship, but I was running on a team to keep myself out of trouble and have some fun. But I found a book that was The Athlete with Diabetes, and it had pictures of all these different athletes, and then it profiled different types of sports and how that sport affected your glucose. And it was written by Sherry Kohlberg. She's a PhD she has type 1. But on the cover was this picture of Missy Foy. And Missy Foy was the first woman with diabetes that made it to the Olympic trials in the marathon. This was like in the early 90s. And I saw that picture of her and I went, okay, if Missy can do it, I can do it. So, I was listening to a podcast of yours about your books that you've done for girls, biking and that. So seeing Missy's picture on that book, I was like, well, shoot, I'm going to go run a marathon. So I was in college and I'm like, I'm going to do a marathon, you
Yep.
know?
Yep. The
Um,
visibility really matters. Um,
yeah.
and I mean, I'm sure even if like you didn't necessarily identify with Stacy, it probably was helpful for even like your friends and like
Oh, for
the
sure.
general population, like just really kind of like seeing this like main character in these books going through that and like just this weird understanding of it. Because yeah, it's like type 1 diabetes is like in my zeitgeist strictly because I was obsessed with those books as a kid.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so you just mentioned that book that you found with all of the athletes who, had type 1 diabetes. It's occurring to me as you're talking about the team in Boston, and I'm thinking about, Team Novo Nordisk. There's a
I was on that
couple
team too.
like, what is up? Sorry, like, what is up with like type 1 diabetics just smashing it in athletics? Like, what is the correlation here? Is it because you're
Yeah.
so good at body cues that like you develop this? Like,
I think, I was thinking about this the other day. I think I'm really stubborn. My older brothers used to like call me like a mule, right? Like growing up, right? They'd go hee haw, like they'd tease me, right? And I'm really, really stubborn and I'm really very competitive. And I think with diabetes, like, I don't know, I kind of hesitate to ever like complain about things because it's like just not how I operate. But it's really hard, right? It's
yeah.
every single day. You don't get a vacation from it. You can do everything absolutely right and not have great results. You could do the same exact thing you did yesterday that worked, and now it doesn't work, right? So I think, yes, you have to be very in tune with your body. I think you know how to suffer, right? So like if a run doesn't go well, it's the same as like a day with diabetes that doesn't go well. And ironically, like riding the bus out to Boston that morning, I actually sat next to a lady, actually from my town that I didn't know, but like we knew each other through social media. I'm like, Karen, are you here? And so we sat on the bus together and we were talking. And she didn't know that much about diabetes. So of course I schooled her on diabetes on the bus ride out, whether she liked it or not. And then the bus, we hit a truck on the highway and the mirror breaks. I mean, everybody was fine, right? But you've got this whole bus full of runners that are like already a little anxious, and everybody's freaking out because we're sitting on the side of the highway forever and we're not getting to Athletes Village on time. And, the clock is ticking. And it happens. And I go, this is just like diabetes. You just get your mirror hit, and now we're sitting on the side of the road waiting for things to happen. Um,
That is like my
so
hell, by the way. Like just imagining that. I'm like, where is the porta potty here? Like, what is happening? Oh my God, I would be terrified. Yeah.
So, I don't know. To go back to your question, like, yeah, racing with diabetes, I don't know if it attracts more people into the sport because we're kind of used to suffering and we're used to a challenge. For me, like a big running moment that changed where I felt like I got a lot better at running and wanted a big challenge was actually after I had kids. So, We currently have a 12 and 14-year-old, but right after the 12-year-old was born, actually right before the 14-year-old was born, I did a marathon thinking I would qualify and I didn't. And then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to have a baby. Let's have a baby. So we had our first son. And then after we had our second son, um, throughout the pregnancy, I mean, a pregnancy is like insane to manage, right? Like you're so stressed and you're so nervous about managing blood sugars because you want to have a healthy baby. And I did, right? They're both healthy, they're both great. Um, but after I did that, I thought, well, gosh, if I can do that well, you know, created a human, I fed a human, I can qualify for Boston. I'm gonna hire a coach, I'm gonna do this the right way, I'm gonna optimize everything. Um, and then I did. So I did Boston in 2016. We had our second son in 2012. So it took me a little while to do it. But yeah, I think that that process of learning how to manage my blood sugar so well during pregnancy made me go, I can really do this well during a marathon. I'm gonna try this again. And the other thing that's been on my side throughout the years is the evolution of technology with diabetes.
Mhm.
That's been a godsend, like having sensors. Now I have a glucose sensor that also talks to my insulin pump that actually automates insulin delivery. So those things are huge, but it's not a cure. There's still a lot we have to do. There's still a lot of fluctuation that happens.
Mhm. Okay, on that note, continuous glucose monitors have really like hit the general public in the last few years.
Yes.
What is your vibe on that as someone who's, really had to have this technology over the years? Do you look at it and
Yeah.
think like this is really cool now people are becoming more aware of like blood sugar and stuff, or are you more like you have no idea how hard this actually is and it's very annoying?
No, actually, like I'm all for it, but it's a little bit of both. Like actually, let's see, last year when I did Boston, I was lining up and I saw a lady with a sensor and I go, "Oh, hey, you've got type 1." She goes, "No." And I'm like, "Wow, whatever." I mean, like no hate, really, but I was just like, you don't understand like how hard this is. And actually my husband has sometimes wanted to wear a sensor and has worn a sensor to see what his glucose does. And one time I actually challenged him, like we had a huge bowl of cereal with like honey on it. And cereal's a really hard thing to manage, like timing of your insulin and not have a massive spike. But I beat his blood sugar. And then he's like, "Oh, you're doping. You're doping. You game the system." I'm like, "I totally did, and I beat you, and I'm so happy."
Yep.
Um,
Totally legal cheating there. Yep.
yeah.
We'll allow
But
it.
no, I think it's cool to see people interested in their glucose. I think there is more fluctuation in normal glucose than people realize.
Hmm.
And the type 2 diabetes is obviously, well, maybe not obviously to everybody, but type 2 is more common than type 1, right? About 90% of the people with diabetes have type 2. So type 1 is the minority. So oftentimes people don't really understand how involved type 1 is. An autoimmune condition, your immune system attacks the cells in your pancreas that make insulin. Um, so I think more people on sensors, the more the merrier, brings maybe more awareness to what we're doing, maybe even helps with the cost, right? Because there's certain sensors now that are just like even no prescription sensors
Hmm.
through Dexcom and Abbott.
Yeah, and I guess even the apps and all of like the technology behind them, right? Like the more people that are, yes, paying to use them, the better the
Exactly.
like all of that stuff's going to be because the more money is coming into it, which is a sad but true fact in that
Exactly.
field.
Exactly.
Um, okay, so I want to actually, now that we're on sensors, let's talk about,
Yeah.
sweat rate testing is obviously a really hot topic. We connected because our friend Mackenzie works with Nick's biosensor. You've been using it. I assume that, having been used to sensors, you actually are like someone who's equipped to say whether or not something like this actually works. Because I think it's very easy for like a
Right.
runner like me to be like, yeah, it said I got sweaty. Like, I guess it works. But you would be very tuned in, um, to if
Yeah.
sensors are working. So talk to me about, why the sweat rate testing was interesting to you, why it matters.
Part of the my first experience at Boston, I'll tell you why, like the sensor, using another sensor and seeing stuff about sweat rate and electrolyte loss and sodium loss is so important to me. I In my first Boston, it was 2016. It was super hot. Boston actually starts later in the day, so depending on what wave you're in, like starting at like 10:50 in the morning for like
Oh,
wave three. So it's a later start. I mean, the whole city shuts down. It's fantastic. There's tons of people out, right? There's quite a bit of, if it's a sunny day, like you get quite a bit of sun exposure. That year it was super hot. And the streets aren't, I mean, at first they're not super wide. Um, in my head that day, I was like, I want a PR. I want to like do as well as I can, right? As any competitive runner. And I didn't do a good job of stopping for water because the water stops were really crowded. I was like, I don't need to stop at every single water stop there, every mile. I'll be fine, right? I'm just gonna go a little faster and go through these. Really, really stupid, right? Really not thinking well. Um, and I got to mile 25. I threw up from dehydration. Weirdest thing, throwing up at Boston because like there's just crowds everywhere. There's no peaceful moment on the course, which is amazing. So I'm throwing up in front of these people. They give me water. They're all fantastic. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm at mile 25. I think it was 25 or 24, somewhere in there. I'm like, I'm not gonna stop now. That's
yeah.
stupid, right? Like, I'm gonna go get my medal and head on over to the medical tent too. Um, so they cheer me on. I finished. I looked kind of gray, honestly. Like looking back at the pictures, I actually filtered some of the pictures because like, oh, I look terrible. Um, and I headed to the medical tent and I got 2.5 bags of fluids, and just felt miserable. I mean, I was like, I never want to do a marathon again. That was the worst experience of my life. What an epic race, but I felt terrible. And then people at the medical tent were like, you're going to be up all night peeing. I did not wake up once to pee. That's how dry I was. It was terrible. So, yes, suffice to say that race taught me a lot about hydration without having a sensor. I realized I did that all wrong. Um, and then last year, I definitely did it better. And it was actually last year was hotter than this year. But I started wearing the Nix biosensor this year. And, being in Idaho, we were training through the winter, running in the snow and all those things. And actually, sometimes in the winter, I think that's when I probably get dehydrated more because I'm not thinking about how much I'm sweating. I'm bundled up. It's freaking cold. I got my gloves on. You know this because I
Oh,
know you're in
yeah.
Canada, right? So same thing. Um, Colder, but
Well,
same
and
idea.
frankly, like it's much harder to actually bring water because like
Yes.
the hose freezes, the bottle freezes. Like it's actually
Yeah.
not really an option unless you wear the pack under your coat and are like trying to like, sip it
Yeah.
under. Yeah,
And
understood.
actually, on one run, I have an insulin pump and there's tubing to it, and I had my tubing exposed, and my insulin actually kind of
Oh, God.
froze. And that, like, so insulin is very temperature sensitive, right? You could get it too hot and cook the insulin, or get it too cold and it freezes and it doesn't work. So I actually had that experience. But yeah, I don't know. I also just have never loved carrying fluids. I just like to, I already carry enough stuff for my diabetes, right? I carry extra gels. I've got my insulin pump on me. I've got my phone on me. I've got, my glucose sensor, all these things. So I just think I've typically done not a fabulous job at hydrating. So the sensor definitely showed me that. First training run, I was like, well, holy crap, if I'm going over, maybe 8 miles, I need to carry fluids with me. Like, this is stupid. Like, I need to be doing this, right? So I got out my hydration pack and started carrying that. It was cool too, because the app will analyze your sweat rate, tell you if you're like a heavy sweater, moderate sweater, light sweater, and then your electrolyte loss. So what was interesting, also comparing notes with other people on the team, is that some people might be maybe not a heavy sweater, but a super heavy electrolyte loss person. So
Hmm.
they think, oh, I don't need to carry stuff because I'm not sweating that much. Well, but you're losing a lot of electrolytes, right? I was kind of moderate on both. Um, and then it also analyzes it and shows you, like, based on all the different hydration drinks, which one matches your loss the best. So I went out and bought that one because I was like, well, let's try what this is doing. And it was good. It was super helpful. Um, but I do kind of wish I could have gotten in some kind of temperature that was similar to what Boston would be, because race day at Boston was obviously much hotter than what I'd been training in. So what was interesting was normally I'm like a 13 to 16 ounce per hour kind of sweat rate person, which I think is pretty common for most people. But at Boston, I was like 20 ounces an hour, right? And the sensors looking at, temp, humidity, dew point, solar load, wind, altitude, all these different um, parts about the environment that you're running in. Um, yeah, it was fascinating. Um,
No, it's super cool to me that that kind of technology is becoming, available to anyone. And, like especially something like that where it does change depending on your situation. Because prior to that, you'd have to do sweat rate testing, in a lab, but then you're in a specific environment, a specific condition. So yes,
right.
you might find you're 13 ounces an hour or whatever, but that could totally change if you go outside and it's warmer or it's windier or whatever. Um,
Exactly. And then the app gives you like alerts when you should be drinking,
Oh,
and you
see,
can link
that's
that.
what I need. Like that is
Yes.
like the thing that I need. Because yeah, I'm a very bad like regular hydrate or fuel person.
Yes. Yes. And then you can link it to your Garmin, and your Garmin can pop up and give those alerts. So I also have on my Garmin my glucose data, my sensor data for my glucose. So I'm looking at that. I'm getting the pop-ups of like drink, so I can see where my glucose is, and then I can see where like what I need to be doing for hydration. So
I
super
love
helpful.
it. I love it. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so one of the questions that, I had and I'm working on a story on, to be totally honest, is hydrating for a really long event. So thinking, your
Yes.
marathon, your century ride, how do you think about that now? Like, what do you think about when you, leave the house? Obviously, a marathon, every mile there is the aid station where you can grab the drink,
Right.
but
Right.
not for your long training runs.
Right. So I'm wearing my I've got a hydration vest, like more for like trail running, right? So I've been utilizing that more. Sometimes I'll dump bottles places, or I'll know well, I lived in Florida for 10 years, and oh my gosh, it was so hot. So we definitely had like places like where we dump water. There were water stations that we would drive, run by. Um, so yeah, I'm doing that. And then, you know, I'm really excited to use this over the summer. I'm doing Trans Rockies in Colorado.
Oh, I'm so jealous. That has been on my bucket list for so long, and the dates have just never worked out, which is so upsetting.
Yeah, so we're doing it. Casey, one of the co-founder of Diabetes Sports Project, and Sophie, so Casey Boren and Sophie Shunk, they did it last year. And I totally had FOMO when they were doing it. I was doing Hood to Coast. So I was like, well, I'm doing Hood Coast. I can't go out there and do that crazy race you guys are doing. So they're doing it again this year. And I was like, I can't have FOMO. I got to go do this. And my friend Elizabeth Hingley, who also has type 1, who's here in Boise, she's a big ultra runner. She's got type 1. She's a nurse practitioner. She's awesome. So she's going to come do it with me. So we're going to do it as a team.
Love it.
So that suffice to say, I mean, it's a 6-day stage race, 120 miles at elevation. I'm kind of going, gosh, what did I sign up for? I've never done more than a marathon. So this is my entry into that kind of funness. Um, so I am definitely relying a lot on this hydration sensor, and kind of upping my fueling game and hydration game to be able to handle that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess like the sensor would also give you this good insight into being able to then pair what the sensor is telling you with how you feel. So, what have you now found for like how are you feeling when you are kind of in that good hydration place versus
Yeah.
when the sensor is like, you're messing this up.
Okay, I have a perfect example. I travel for work, so I cover a large area. I cover Idaho, Washington, Oregon. I can go up to Alaska as well. So I was in Seattle, and I knew that weekend we had a ski trip planned with the kids, and I wouldn't have that much time to run. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do my long run while I'm here in Seattle. It was the end of the work day. I'm like, I'm going to leave my hotel. I'm just going to go do this unknown route. And then I was meeting friends for dinner. So I was like, I got to get to this. I've got my hydration vest. Yeah, I've got enough time just barely to shower and then meet my friends for dinner. And I'm like, shoot, I don't know how I'm going to feel after 18 miles. And it was a little warmer because it was at the end of the day, right? You just got to get it in when you can get it in. But I hydrated really well. I got back to the hotel, and the hydration sensor also tells you how much to take in when you're done with your run. And you can input like how much you took in during the run, and then it like calculates what you should be taking in. So I did that, and I felt amazing. I mean, I didn't even feel like I'd run 18 miles. I did some of it at like marathon pace, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles at like, 7:30 to 7:50 pace. And I met my friends for dinner, and they're not runners, so whenever you meet people that aren't runners, and you're like, what'd you do today? And they're like, what the hell did you do? Why would you do that? Did you get
See,
lost?
I need more of these friends because unfortunately all of my friends are like ultra runners. So you say like, "Oh, I did 25 miles today." They're like,
And they're not impressed.
yeah. Oh, so you went short today. And you're like, "Oh."
But yeah, I don't know. It was like after some of these long runs within the training, when I hydrated like that, I just felt amazing. Like I felt really good. Where before, after a long run, I'd be like, my husband would know I'm going to be kind of dead to the world and be like, laying on the couch, like not wanting to do anything. And now I'm like, okay, I'm meeting my friends for dinner. We're going to have a drink. This is super fun.
You're
Or,
so
on the
right.
weekend.
It's like the
Yeah.
aftermath is actually almost the best indicator versus the
Yes.
in it. Because yes, have had this
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. So just feeling in, the other runs, like during the day, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go, do some gardening, or my kids wanna, they want to go skiing. So hey, mom got her long run in. Let's drive up to the mountain, go get some
Hmm.
skiing done. So yeah, just a ton more energy. And actually, when you think about cues of dehydration, I mean, I think the thing we rely on most is like when we get thirsty, we're like, oh, we should drink. And if you're thirsty, like you've missed the boat. Like it's gone. You're now dehydrated. Your performance has now gone down. But being tired, sometimes it can affect heart rate, dizzy, gut issues, like all kinds of stuff can happen with dehydration that can also then affect your fueling, right? Like if you're
Hmm.
having gut issues and you're tired and you're like, like, and your blood volume goes down, right? So then you think about, it's already hard enough to absorb carbohydrates and fuel when you're running, and then if you're dehydrated on top of it, now you've also affected how well you can take in food,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
exactly. Yeah, like taking in all the gels in the world does not do any good if there is no water to actually start
Exactly.
moving that along and letting you digest it. And yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh,
Exactly.
yeah. So good. And I mean, I think, your your story, how you've like learned to deal with type 1 diabetes, still going after these goals. I think it really is just important for not just people with diabetes, but people who have any kind of these chronic conditions, because we hear from them so often that,
Yeah.
it is a major barrier to doing stuff. But clearly, you know, you
Doesn't need to be.
it's not easy, but it doesn't need to be. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, I guess like what's, if you're leaving someone with like one last piece of advice, someone who maybe is kind of, maybe they just kind of found out they have this kind of chronic condition, mindset wise, what's sort of your best advice for them to kind of keep getting after it?
I think I think the best advice is like I've learned the most when things don't go my way.
Ooh.
And I will take a screenshot of, my glucose data and my pump data, and I'll make notes on that photo of like what I did during it, right? Like maybe I had too much insulin on board, I didn't fuel enough, I didn't whatever, right? Like not my fault, right? Like this is really crummy to deal with. But if I can analyze what went wrong, then I can go back next time and go, okay, I'm going to try a different strategy and I'm going to try this. And And then of course celebrating when it goes right and remembering what you did when it went right so you can hopefully replicate that. Um, and also like not doing this alone. So, follow Diabetes Sports Project on, especially on Instagram. When we post, I do a lot of the social media posts. I'm trying to weave in some education without maybe giving medical advice because that's a fine line to walk, right? Everybody's diabetes is different. You can't follow one way of doing something and expect it to work. You've got to try out different things. Make sure you're working with an endocrinologist and a diabetes educator. If you don't have one, there's definitely ones that can do work with patients remotely. And then, try and find your tribe, find some people to run with, try and meet some people with type 1 that know the challenges you're going through so that you're not doing this by yourself. Sometimes just having somebody to listen when it goes wrong, right?
Absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Love it. Love it. And that's at Diabetes Sports Project on Instagram, diabetessportsproject.com. We'll include links to those in
Yep.
the show notes. Everyone should go follow whether or not you have type 1 diabetes. I think it's just such an awesome, thing that you're doing and awareness that you're bringing. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for chatting today and all of this really interesting, like, talk about all things, hydration, type 1 diabetes. Like, I feel like we went in a lot of directions and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was super fun. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.
Thank you so much.